Hi, welcome to the podcast. Okay, so I think the best place to start is just a quick intro to who you are and like where you work and that kind of thing, if that's fine.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. So my name is Cornelia and I'm the head of CX at Organic Basics, which is a Danish DNVB creating underwear and activewear, everyday essentials that are ethically produced in Europe.
Nice.
I joined there at the end of 2019 as the first full-time CXer and have since built and scaled the team from hiring to training to processes, systems, and so we've grown quite a bunch since. We're a team of 9 now, very international team. We have 10 nationalities on my team alone, and yeah, many of them come from bilingual backgrounds and bring lots of different languages and culture, and so that also makes it a lot of fun and obviously also makes sense from a customer perspective to be able to meet customers in their own language where possible.
Yeah, that's cool. Is it mainly Europe?
So we're Danish, as I said. So Denmark has kind of historically been our biggest market, but it's actually since been overtaken by Germany, and France is really, really big as well. And so like generally Central Europe is definitely our biggest market, but we sell to the UK as well and to the States and Canada, and we have customers in Asia. So it's kind of like we sell to, I think, 80 different countries, if I'm not wrong. So we're accessible to quite a few countries, but we're definitely most known in Europe.
Cool. Okay. I love that. I love your mission as well. It's great. Like I'm definitely behind the sustainable fashion.
Yeah, I think our mission actually, like in the wording, our mission is that we are here to help solve the climate crisis one piece of garment at a time. And we're kind of aware that like sustainability is hard to actually achieve in the fashion industry, but we work with goals like low impact, net zero, carbon negativity to kind of try and push the industry in a better direction than where it's previously been.
Nice. That's really cool. Definitely. Okay, so the topic that we're going to talk about today was about how innovative and interesting like the routing process that you have. And for anyone who doesn't know, CX at Organics Basics also covers customer support, right? I think that's not always like 100% in every company. So we're talking about routing and prioritization of support tickets, which sound like a really innovative kind of way, like that I'd not heard before. Could you, I guess just to kick us off onto that subject, what's the big picture of how that works? What is like kind of prioritization routing, and how does that look for you?
Definitely. So for us, we use customer data to route conversations. So we'll use data that we have, for instance, from our Shopify, and since we're an e-commerce business, from our newsletter platform, from our returns system, and kind of all of it usually is linked through the email address. So or a phone number, the kind of the data that a customer would enter in either a newsletter or Shopify circumstances, placing an order, signing up, and so on. And then we kind of use that data to help us understand where is this customer coming from in their customer journey right now. So to give you an example, when a customer reaches out and we can see that this email address is associated with an order that was placed in the last 24 hours, then we can make a pretty solid assumption that if they're reaching out now, it's most likely because they have questions about their order, they want to change something. So we really want to get to that message before their order ships, because once the order ships, it's really hard for us to make changes, whether it's to the address or the content itself. And so that's something that we would prioritize quite heavily. And another thing we would do is if for instance, an email address has no orders associated to it, but we can see they're signed up for the newsletter. And Ben, you've worked in marketing as well for many years, like you'll know that's kind of a hot lead. So they've shown interest in the brand, but they haven't quite yet kind of gotten around to purchasing the product or placing an order. So there's also kind of an opportunity for us to turn that into a sale. So that will kind of go a specific route within our system. And we can also check if customers have placed an order and we can see it's older than 24 hours, but it's still their first order. That's also a really great opportunity to make a good impression. First-time buyers want to make sure that they get quick and helpful service if there's any questions they have about their returns or any of the sizing or care and wash instructions or anything like that. We want to make sure that we can service that quite quickly. For returns. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. So one of these things, like you make an assumption, I guess, beneficial to you or the customer in some way, and you see like a trigger for it, and then what will happen? It will like triage that to, I don't know, just triage it to the top of the queue, or how does that work?
So we have multiple queues. So we probably have like 12 different queues in our system, and they're divided into a priority queue. And in that priority queue, we'll have 4 or 5 languages, depending on who's at work and kind of who we've got. So if we can see it's placed within the last 24 hours and the language is German, it will go straight to a priority German queue. And that queue itself has a very high priority. So if anything pops into that queue, the system kind of has an algorithm that will offer the message kind of like a push notification to the person who speaks that language who's available right now. And then the same is like if we can see it's not a priority, so order was placed more than 24 hours ago, but it's a kind of a circumstance that we consider as a lead, it'll go to the lead queue. And then again, kind of like based on language, we'll sort it into 4 or 5 different language categories. So we have like with all the different language variations and the different kind of customer journey stages, we have probably around 12, 15 queues in our system. And those queues are prioritized. So priority queues are up here, and then, you know, the leads and the first order and so on, and the returns, so that we can make sure that whatever is time sensitive, we get to that first, no matter what time during the day. If anything pops into that priority queue, it's going to be pushed out first, even though there's other queues that might have something that's less time sensitive.
And I noticed you said pushed out there. So I guess it doesn't rely on the agent to like check the queue, but it goes to
No, and that's actually really, really beautiful. It's a bit different than some of the systems that I worked with previously. With this system, it's a Danish company as well called Dixa, and they kind of really encourage they really encourage agents not having to spend time to dig through and find out, okay, what do I need to answer next? But instead, you kind of code this algorithm, you put in all the data that you want to add, figure out your priorities, and then the system will automatically push it onto the agents that are available.
Okay, cool. Oh, that's so good. Yeah, I like the idea. I really like the idea of agents really just not having to do anything, but just talk to customers and to like do what they're good at, like the
exactly. I mean, like you say, that's what they're good at, right? Because they're like, there's no reason for us to spend time to do something that a machine can do 10 times faster than us. And then instead we actually use that time to be the humans we are, to build relationships, to, you know, crack a joke with the customer if it's appropriate, and to really build these connections, because that's kind of where we see our customer service or customer love, as we call it, actually comes in and really makes a difference for the customers. And the happier the customer is, the better experience they have, the more likely they also stick with the brand in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. Do you like train agents to encourage people into sales, or is everyone trained the same, or do you have like particular agents?
Everybody's trained the same way. So we're a very kind of flat and organization, and everybody has all the skills that are needed across the departments, and customer service is one of the things that we do, and all of us actually do it on a daily basis. And we don't really distinguish between who works on which queues necessarily. So there's not like the ones that are experts at creating sales and the ones that are experts at resolving critical issues. Everybody's able to do all of that and kind of step in where it's needed, which also makes it quite agile and flexible to really put resources wherever it's needed at the time.
That makes sense. I guess if you're like an enormous organization, it might make sense to like go into skills to specialize, but also it's much more interesting for an agent to have a variety of experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the more you can make the day interesting and not monotone, the more likely they're also going to be to kind of keep giving these really excellent experiences to customers, because they're motivated intrinsically. But you're right, obviously scale comes into it at some point, and then it might make sense to kind of slice it a bit more and make sure to train people to more focused areas if the volume is kind of where that makes sense. Definitely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I would like to like go into the rules that you use. I guess, how did you just which contacts to prioritize and that kind of thing? You mentioned a few different things there. I love that so many times I bought a t-shirt from a brand and then it's gone to the wrong address because I typed in the wrong address or something, and then it goes there anyway, even though I was like immediately emailing them.
And that just feels wasteful to you, right? Like, even though you did your bit to rectify your message right away, but if it just doesn't get seen in the inbox of a million other things, then it's time consuming for you and time consuming for reps to fix the mistake, and also just wasteful in terms of the planet, of the emissions of it going back and forth. So yeah, so there's a lot of reasons to do it. For us being an e-commerce business, obviously like orders leaving the warehouse is kind of what is really critical for us. But you could really like plug anything. You could plug customer lifetime value if that's something that's important to you, or NPS scores, or order numbers, or whatever. So I think the exercise would kind of be to figure out, like, you as a customer service team, what is it that matters to your customers? What kind of data points do you have available, and how can you use those to get the best out of it, to make a priority or some kind of like algorithm and routing that offers the most value to you.
Okay. So I guess it all comes back at the end of the day to how does it add more value to the business, even if it is like making customers like you more and have a great time. But yeah, I guess there's like some that are much more kind of hard on, okay, we need to get the sale, make it easier for them to check out or make it the sale quicker. And then there's the others which are more about experience.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's, again, it depends on what you're prioritizing, but for us, the leads queue, for instance, was really, really helpful. Like to just kind of take that knowledge of this email is signed up to the newsletter, but has never placed an order in our system. Like it's quite interesting information, and you can do with it what you like, but you could interpret it as okay, they're reaching out now. Most likely they're actually curious now to place an order or have questions about sizing or whatever. And then, like you say, like ease that checkout process has been quite lucrative for us in terms of conversion.
That's cool. Very interesting. Is there anything, so like, do you continuously update these rules, or is there anything you would do differently if you could go back to the process from the start?
Yeah, super good question. I mean, we've kind of had we've had our iterations of it. Like, I think the first kind of version that we had was to use phrases or wording like in an email. So if somebody mentions like order change or something like that, then that would like trigger the prioritization. But it's just not as bulletproof as if you actually use the customer data to back up that decision where to route. Or we would use kind of like certain keywords to detect the language. And that can work in most cases. But again, if you actually, I think we hooked up the Google Translate API basically, which is like with 99% like security can detect languages. And that's just going to make it much more efficient. So I think when we implemented this, it was in the beginning of the year. We kind of played around with it in December and sat down also with like a cross-departmental team. So there was some people from my team, there was some people, our backend developers, there was somebody from Insights. And together we kind of figured out, okay, which data do we have? What makes sense? And I think that was a pretty good process. And we're still pretty happy with kind of where we are now. 6 months later, we're really seeing the fruits of the labor, because it does take some time to set up. But we're monitoring it in the sense that sometimes conversations anyway then end up in the wrong queue. And it's kind of like, okay, but this should have been here. Why is it not here? And we've actually like kept a list and said like, okay, this conversation ID ended up here, should have been here. And then once we had kind of like, I don't know, 50 cases over the course of 3 months or so, we went back to our developer and back to Dixa, also who helped us set this up, to figure out, okay, what do these cases have in common? And it turns out there was something about the way they get in contact where language detection wasn't as good as it was for email and live chat and for some of the other things, because it was more like a contact form. And then those things kind of like come up over time, and then you fine tune and can kind of like iterate on it and make it.
Nice. That's cool. It's nice that Dix is helping you with this as well.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah. Definitely.
So what kind of like language stuff are you detecting? Are you really using words to like, you know, like returns to just send it into a returns pile?
Yeah, that's what we used to do. And then it worked like some of the time, and some of the time it just didn't work. So now the only language detection we do is, or the only wording detection we do is based on that Google Translate API, which will tell us that this conversation is from Ben and he's speaking English. So it should definitely go to the English queue, whichever priority then it fits into. And we'll do the same with German, Danish, obviously, French, and so on.
Sorry, so it's like it's actually just detecting which language it is, not like...
Exactly. So the language detection tells you which language or which agent can reply. And then the customer data will tell you where in the kind of priority of all the different queues it should feed in, so that it would be replied at the most sensible time in relation to which issue it is.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, very interesting. It sounds very complex and interesting and like fun to set up.
It's super fun to set up, yeah. But I think definitely like having a backend developer, having someone from your Insights team, or having someone who's tried it before to give some good advice really helps. And then the CX team are the ones who can kind of say, this is what we get a lot, and this is where usually like conversations end up wrong, and this is what we want to fix. And then together it becomes a really nice process.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And it needs to be like a group thing, right?
Yeah, it adds so much more value, definitely.
Where have you seen like the biggest impact? Like what's the benefit?
So like one of the things we also previously have had is that we had this like timeout. So we had, let's say, a support queue that was kind of just general inquiries, but then we had this rule that like if they wouldn't be answered after 24 hours because we hadn't gotten to them yet, then they would be moved to what was then the priority queue. And it just ended up being like in peak season times, especially, the priority queue, which actually also had all the cases that were more time sensitive, were also just cluttered with like older messages. And so the priority queue was just kind of always this big long queue that just wasn't really actually priority cases. And just kind of refiguring out that like, okay, it timed out, but maybe it should just be offered in the same queue again and not everything just moving to priority. So you really keep that priority level really clean for the cases that come in that actually need instant help. That was a really big game changer for us.
Okay, interesting. Did you say earlier like that you had seen like a lot of like increase in sales from this kind of thing, or do you see like customer satisfaction rising, or what do you think has been the impact like or the benefit of that?
Yeah. I think for us, the benefit has definitely been efficiency. And so with that, there was a bunch of other things that we did, like integrating more of our systems because we were anyway pulling the API. So it made sense to also put kind of like a little sidebar where you can have like your newsletter sign up and see, have they actually signed up for the newsletter, yes or no? And if so, when, if they, for instance, reach out and say, hey, I didn't receive the newsletter yet, you can quite quickly just basically click on one link and it'll take you directly to their profile inside Klaviyo, for instance. And the same with like Shopify orders. Just one click will, like the overview will be there, but just one click will take you directly to where you kind of need to go. And just overall, like it's improved a lot of efficiency within the team in terms of reply time, in terms of the time sensitive cases that I mentioned before, actually being handled on time and just being able to fix a lot of the issues before it was too late. And so resulting in a much better experience for the customer and less cost for us. And obviously, like when I say efficiency has gone up and reply time has gone up, it's a bit of a mixed bag of a lot of things that kind of were optimized. So not everything can be credited only to the routing, but it definitely creates a much more clean experience also for agents, that they don't, like a French speaker will not be offered a Danish conversation that then they won't be able to answer and have to put somewhere else. And then it also just lacks the reply time for the customer, right? Like all the time it takes for their conversation to kind of be passed around internally before anybody actually gets to answer it. Like that's just waste of time. So that's been completely eliminated.
Nice, cool. Yeah, it seems like a bit of an all-round benefit. I think the integration side of things is cool too. It's so nice to have everything in one sort of place. What else can I ask you on this topic actually? What would you want to know if you're listening?
I think if I were listening out, I'd be curious to kind of like, where do I start if I want to implement this?
Okay.
I think it's probably a lot of tools like offer something similar, so a lot of support tools. So I think also a good starting point is just having a chat with them and kind of figuring out, do they have any additional tools or services or integrations that you as a company might not be making full use of yet. At least that's how we got started with this. It's really, really good to just check in with them and kind of figure out what can they actually offer that you're not fully using yet, and then get the right people around a table and just have a conversation about it. And in the end, like it can seem like big and scary and you know, figuring out which data and how do you route it, but at the end of the day, like if once you kind of just start having a conversation, maybe you can start somewhere, usually always, and then you can always like build on that later. And that would be my recommendation.
Cool. Yeah. So like get talking to your provider. I think a lot of the time they have stuff that you would never even know about. Hopefully it's free as well in your package.
Yeah, usually, exactly. I mean, obviously, like there's a lot of upsell and so on, and that's not really what I'm getting at. It's more like the things that are like in your package and on your level. Like, are you actually fully utilizing all the things that they can offer?
Yeah, and their customer success teams and stuff should be on it, helping you really.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's been a great topic. Thanks for coming on and talking about it. I know we're gonna talk again on the next episode of this podcast. So I'll see you then.
Perfect. Great. Thanks so much.